So we've talked about the subject. It's that abstract or intangible concept like friendship, love, freedom, democracy. The assertion, that's the next part. So we have S and A, is your interpretation, the conclusion that you draw about that abstract concept. Okay, so this is where you get to have your idea about the poem. And the theme is the simple message that the author wants to convey about the human condition. So that actually answers the question to number 2. Number 4. So if your abstract concept is beauty, you can't touch beauty, and everyone's idea of beauty should be somewhat different. Tell me, what is beauty to you? So you can pause the video and please fill in the answer to that. Number 5, beauty is an abstract concept. An author might be trying to prove in his or her poem that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What does that mean? So this would be a theme that you might state in your introduction, subject, assertion, theme. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That is a theme that has this abstract concept of beauty. What does that mean? Go ahead and fill in, pause the video and fill in what that means. I'm going to keep moving on. It says, here's an example where an abstract concept is given. See if you can identify the abstract concept by underlining or highlighting it. So this right here is an example of a subject, assertion, and theme introduction. It says in Sonnet 73, now we're referring back to the poem that we read at the beginning of the lesson, the narrator discusses his concerns with aging. Read his sonnet carefully, then write an essay that discusses how he feels, analyzing the poetic techniques he uses to explore this particular situation. So this is an SAT prompt. It's a question. What is the abstract concept that they ask about in this prompt? Abstract concepts like beauty, independence, freedom, democracy. What is it that cannot be touched? Please highlight or underline that abstract concept now. Moving on. So now you have to create an introduction paragraph answering this prompt. Your intro might look like this. Here's a sample introduction. SAT intro. In Sonnet 73, the narrator doesn't seem concerned with aging, as he knows that it increases his lover's fondness for him. His use of natural metaphors and imagery point the reader toward Shakespeare's theme of time waits for no man. Go back to the sample thesis and underline the subject, highlight the assertion, and box the theme. So I want you to pause and try this on your own. I am going to do it as well. So first I want to underline the subject. I'm looking for that abstract or intangible concept. Here it is aging. People getting older isn't something we can touch. We all get older. We can't really touch that idea. Somebody might look old and have a wrinkly face. We can touch a wrinkly face, but we can't touch the concept of aging. The assertion is the claim that you're making, and usually that claim contains some reference to the author's choices in language. So you're making a claim about what the author did to prove a point. So in this case, the assertion, and I'm going to put a box around it because I don't have a highlighter, is this: his use of natural metaphors and imagery. And finally, we have our theme. Point the reader towards Shakespeare's theme of time waits for no man. Oh, that one was supposed to be boxed. So I made a mistake. I'm going to just squiggly underline that. So there we have our subject, our assertion, and our theme. We don't have to use metaphors and imagery. We could talk about the words that he uses. We could talk about punctuation or repetition. It's your choice here what you'll point out about the poet's choices. Moving on. Once you've composed your introduction and have decided on a thesis and a theme, you now have to prove it. The good news is that you can still use the framework of Melcon body paragraphs for this portion of the essay. Look back at the original prompt your teacher has given you. So we're going to read the prompt one more time. In Sonnet 73, the narrator discusses his concern with aging. Read his sonnet carefully. Then write an essay that discusses how he feels, analyzing the poetic techniques he uses to explore his particular situation. Does it say what types of poetic techniques the teacher wants you to focus on? No, it doesn't, not in this case, but sometimes it will. For our sake, it won't. I'm not going to tell you what poetic techniques to focus on. I'm going to give you the choice. At times, the prompt might mention metaphors, similes, diction, syntax, irony. The prompt gives you what you need to discuss. In this case, though, we're on our own. Now, since I've read Sonnet 73 many times over, and I have, and you probably have read it only a few times, or maybe you've never even heard of it, I'll just tell you that Shakespeare uses 3 images to demonstrate aging. And the sonnet itself is a metaphor. So I've chosen, in my response, to talk about imagery and metaphors. Here's a reminder of what I wrote. So here's my SAT intro again, with my subject, my assertion, and my theme. In Sonnet 73, the narrator doesn't seem concerned with aging, as he knows that it increases his lover's fondness for him. His use of natural metaphors and imagery point the reader toward Shakespeare's theme of time waits for no man. My first body paragraph will probably begin like this. So now we've moved on. We were talking about the SAT intro, but now you're going to see an example of a Melcon. The Melcons that I'm going to ask you to produce should have 2 to 3 pieces of evidence, and that of course means 2 to 3 strong links explaining how the evidence supports your claim. So it says, Shakespeare's first use of natural metaphors in lines 1 to 4 demonstrate the times of day in relationship to the times of life. The author compares late middle age to fall when he states, when yellow leaves or none or few do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold. So here we have our main idea. We have a really nice transition into our evidence. We have our evidence and the beginning of the link. So the link reads, the image of the yellow leaves. Notice how, when I was writing, I pulled out a piece of the evidence. I pulled out a quote and put it under the microscope. This is something that you should be doing when you're writing your links. So you have your long piece of evidence from the line, and then you pull out a piece of evidence to discuss in more detail. The image of the yellow leaves, which are falling quickly from the trees, where none or few do hang, again, notice I'm pulling out part of the evidence that I mentioned here. Those yellow leaves represent the days left in the speaker's life as he prepares for the coming chill of death. So we have a comparison of fall and dying. And of course, winter in the metaphor is death. So if you're in autumn in your life, then you're starting to near death, and that's showed by these yellow leaves. The boughs, figuratively, shake against the cold. Again, notice how I am pulling out specific words from my piece of evidence and discussing them in greater detail. Death is often represented in the image of a chilling force, sucking life from whatever it will. We're on page 28 now. The aging narrator says that the person looking at him sees this in him, that time of you thou mayest in me behold. Walk back through the above paragraph and label it for Melcon. Well, I did that together with you. Put an M next to the main idea, underline the evidence, highlight the link, and box the conclusion. Do you see how I've given context, explained what's happening in the lines of poetry? That's called explication. And then related it back to my figurative language or imagery, so related it back to the main idea. I've also related it back to my thesis, but haven't quite talked about how it relates to my theme yet. Does anyone remember what the theme was? I do. I'm going to go back to page 27. The theme was Time Waits for No Man. So we haven't quite said how it relates to that idea of time waits for no man, but that's okay. This is one body paragraph. All of the evidence comes from the poem, and I haven't referenced anyone outside of that. It's my idea, not someone else's. And that's the way that literary analysis is different from an argumentative nonfiction essay, like Why Read, Why Write? You don't use outside sources. Here's the good news about all of this. So if you're watching this video and you're feeling like this seems really hard or I'm a little overwhelmed, this is the good news. I'm not going to be judging you on whether you're right about your interpretation. The truth of the matter is that there are multiple ways to interpret literature and poetry. You must always have evidence supporting your analysis, though. So if you don't have evidence, then you will be judged. But if you have evidence and you're using it to support your ideas, then what I'm really looking at is the process and not the product at this point. So take some risks in your interpretations and always go back to the text if you're stuck. It says after writing 3 or 4 body paragraphs, but we don't need to do that. How many are we writing? We are writing just one body paragraph that has 2 to 3 pieces of evidence. You'll want to end your analysis. Simply restate your thesis and theme in a new way, and then summarize what you've said so far. So this is our stack paragraph, the final paragraph of your assessment. So it says, restate your thesis and theme, just like we did with our Why Read, Why Write, in a new way, don't say the same words, and summarize what you've said so far. If you've mentioned allusions or stanzas or metaphor or simile as being important to your thesis and the author's craft, you better mention them one more time. Wrap it all up for your reader, then you're done. Way to go! You've just written your first literary analysis. So when you come back to school, we're going to talk about writing an SAT introduction and writing a good Melcon about a poem. And don't worry, we're going to practice it several times together. But right now, after this lesson, I want you to fill in these 3 fields. So what questions do you have about writing a literary analysis? Maybe you still can't see how it's different from an argumentative one. What 2 characteristics of a literary analysis might give you trouble? So what seems to be difficult for you about this? And what one thing do you think you'll really excel at? So what do you like? What do you think might be good for you? Thank you for following along. Please feel free to watch the video again if you need some more clarification. And come to class on Tuesday with all of the fields filled out from pages 25 through 28, ready to talk about how to write about poetry. Bye-bye.